It's so strange that this phone is actually kind of good. On paper, we have the almost Pixel 3 level speed, but at the same time, this might be one of the best small pixels with a 60Hz display, even though it's actually taller than the Pixel Fold. I honestly didn't expect this year, but somehow the Google Pixel 4a is still a good phone. And there's some parts that make sense about this phone and others that don't. For one, it was a $350 phone when new, so corners were definitely cut to create this. It's strange because this was a mid-range phone, but has some budget aspects, and essentially it is a budget phone after 6 years. At about $100 for a used one, it feels like a lot, but also is standard for buying phones online. If you do, make sure to get a Google version that has an unlockable bootloader. Don't buy a Verizon or a carrier-locked one. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The physical appeal of this phone is its size, being the third shortest pixel by a small amount, again with the Pixel Fold being the shortest pixel ever. That's always a funny fact. But this 5.67-inch tall phone is 143 grams in weight, which ties it with the Pixel 1 for being the lightest pixel. While the design is similar, headset jack and mic on the top, volume and power buttons on the right side, SIM tray on the left, there is an obvious difference from the Pixel 1. The bottom has a microphone, USB-C 3.1 port, and loudspeaker that pairs with the earpiece for a stereo feel that doesn't sound amazing, but is cool to have. But the main difference from the metal and glass Pixel 1 is that we get a plastic back, something that can look bad if you don't take care of it. Now the back is obviously a Pixel 4 style, but you do retain the rear fingerprint scanner, which is always nice to see. But the Pixel 4 style that I'm talking about is the single camera and the flash island. Then on the front, we have Gorilla Glass 3, which is funny to see because the Pixel 1 was actually Gorilla Glass 4. This has an earpiece loudspeaker, like I said, but also a hole punch for the front camera, making this the first hole punch camera on a Pixel phone, and actually at the time, the highest screen-to-body ratio on a Pixel. This is a 5.81-inch 1080p hard OLED panel with a 60Hz refresh rate that gets about 450 nits in manual brightness mode and over 800 nits in auto mode. Remember, this is a $300 Pixel phone, and also the cheapest one they ever made. I will say it wasn't super bright to me, but did work fine indoors. To power this phone, we get the Snapdragon 730G chip with 6GB RAM and 128GB of UFS 2.1 storage. And because of this, we have to remember that this is a 4G phone, so no 5G, obviously. The good news about that is that it's something that doesn't really matter right now. Ironically, I was actually thinking about this earlier today, but does 5G actually matter to you yet? I use 4G only or 5G phones all the time, and 4G is still really good. 3G, however, was terrible, so I can't really make that comparison, but having a phone be on 4G only isn't always the worst. But you do have to remember going into 2030 means that we are getting closer to sunsetting 4G, which ultimately doesn't matter because this phone runs Android 13 and will forever, so I guess it's okay. And when I compare this to the Samsung A15, I'm so glad that this is on Android 13 because these are very similar processors, and Android 16 just makes the experience of the A15 tough. Now your app usage may vary. Most of the apps that I use need Android 10 or newer, so it's not really an issue for me, but for your life, being stuck on Android 13 might be an issue. But if you get one that allows you to unlock the bootloader, then XDA Developers is your oyster. I think that's how you say that. It's okay. I mean, the 730G chip is a mid-range processor, and it definitely shows whether we're talking about gaming or app speed, but at the same time, again, pretty decent for what it is. Don't expect the world, but also the phone is fast enough to not make you hate using it, unless you don't like 60Hz screens. That was actually the worst part for me. Visually, it still looks good, but it is a smaller screen, and at my age of still young, 6 to 6.3 inch screens is where my eyes don't complain about the screen size. And with this size, we get a 3140 mAh battery that is, well, not great. It's reached iPhone SE levels, meaning that you'll get maybe 1% a minute of usage or 2 hours of screen on time total, but that's assuming that the battery hasn't been replaced yet, which the company Lishan kind of forces you to do. You've probably heard of the battery problem, the one that every single device will ever have, but in this one it's common for the battery to bloat and cause the battery to create a threat and a technical recall, but the situations where they catch on fire are generally from those that don't understand a bloating phone is dangerous, like mine. 18 watts of wired charging in 2020 is surprising on a budget phone, but definitely not too fast today. What's also getting old is the camera. While the specs match the Pixel 5 and 6a, I don't know if they're the exact same sensor. Anyways, the 12.2 megapixel camera has optical image stabilization and still looks pretty good. The image signal processor is probably weaker than the other phones that I mentioned, but this single camera point and shoot is still solid in the quality area. 4K 30 frames per second video max is expected and looks okay. Having this camera is nice to see for those trying to save money, and I personally think it holds up well. The front camera though, basic 8 megapixel camera that records 1080p at 30 frames per second video, which is expected and definitely nothing to write home about. This camera might actually be the same type of camera that was used in the Pixel Fold, and that would be funny if it's true. But like the camera, sure, the phone isn't super fast and super fluid in motion, but it also still just works with little to no problems. You just might have to wait a little bit while opening apps. Now, let's assume that you do want this phone. What do you have to think of? Well, this is a budget phone with a mid-range processor, but with no more software updates, this technically can't slow down anymore unless the processor starts to physically break and ruin the experience. I still think that there's some value for this phone, but for those looking for phones on the larger side, clearly this isn't it. This is for those that want to spend less money on a smaller phone. There is the added benefit of a type of unlimited photo storage on Google, but I don't think that's worth buying this for when it's $20 to $30 a year for you to get 100 to 200 gigabytes of cloud storage. But hey, maybe it's worth it for you. If I had to guess, the battery obviously is only going to get worse. I would recommend changing it if it hasn't been done before, which is easy to do and I can show you on my channel. Don't be an amateur, just learn how to change the battery without breaking the screen. Speaking of that screen, they are still pretty expensive, generally around the same price as this phone used, so yeah, don't break that screen. Software-wise, you can unlock the bootloader and change the operating system, but then you run into Google Pay or RCS issues, which the latter is a deal breaker for me. It's a nice option to take back your phone, but at what cost? The cult following behind this phone makes sense. Now, I don't think it's worth buying, but that's at the $100 plus price. Getting this phone cheap is possible. Heck, I picked this one up for $20. Sure, it needs a new battery, but the flea market is a great option as long as you check the IMEI and make sure you're not buying a stolen phone. All of this said, maybe you'll just want one for the headset jack. And that's my review of the Google Pixel 4a, the best value Pixel phone ever. What do you think? Let me know, and as always, thanks for joining the 1%, and thanks for watching.